On that sheet, they're saying it's not so halachic over here. Uh, it's um, it's from later in the Rambam. What does he say over here? Let's look. Let's read it. In the laws of the kings and their wars, the Rambam talks about ideally how we should relate to the Gentile world. And here it says, "V'chein tziva Moshe Rabbeinu mipiad v'ra." Moses was commanded by God. "L'chov et kol be'oel ha'olam l'kabel kol mitzvot shenitzvav Noah." Really, we're supposed to force everybody, ba'e olam, that means all of humanity, to keep the commandments that were commanded to Noah. L'chol mi shelo kibel yehareg. Anybody who doesn't should be killed. Ma'mekabel otham, and someone who does accept the Noahide commandments, hu hanikra ger toshav v'chol makom. That's what we call a resident alien in all places in this halachic work. V'tzarich l'kabel lav b'fnei shlosha chavirim. And he accepts this status by making a declaration in front of three proper Jewish people, an ad hoc based in. Any Gentile who's accepted upon himself even to get circumcised is to convert. But for whatever reason, he's been pushing it off. Yeah, I'll convert. But then it takes 12 months. We treat him like any other mean among the Gentiles. We said that's a person who actually believes in idols and other things. We stop entertaining that he will actually convert, which is kind of ironic. Here the Rambam says you have a legitimate convert if he's really serious about converting, so we convert him right away. Whereas nowadays, because of the rabbinic bureaucracy, and this is a well-known story, it takes many legitimate converts, sincere converts to Judaism, years, 5 years, 10 years to actually convert to Judaism, which is kind of weird. Okay. We see another example where apparently the practice is not like that of the Rambam. Whoever accepts these 7 commandments and is careful at keeping them, so the pious nations of the world, like the Rambam said above, like we saw earlier, and even as a portion of the world to come. But of course, he has to accept the commandments and do them. Why? Because that's what the Holy One, blessed be He, commanded in His Torah. And He informed us of these matters through Moses, our master. And He told us that there, B'nai Noach, even well before there was any Moses, before there was Jewish people, before there was a revelation at Sinai, all of humanity had already been given these commandments. That is, this Ben Noach is keeping the commandments because he knows it's the right thing. He believes in God. Let's say he figured out that he's supposed to be keeping these 7 commandments because he is rational and he's wise enough to discern them himself. That's Hachrei Hadaf. Let's say the type of status that the Greek philosophers could achieve without encountering Jews. Ein ze ger toshav. So he is not a ger toshav, a resident alien. He's not considered of the pious of the Gentile world. Ella mechach mehem. He's considered one of their wise men, wise in religious sensibilities. Remember, there's all sorts of wisdoms out there. Some could be wise because of its mathematics or music, but some are wise in human behavior and culture. In this case, they're considered wise men. So this is an important principle about proper intentions. You could end up doing the right thing. For Jews, we have mitoch shelo lishma balishma. If a Jew does something for the wrong intentions, it's good anyways because eventually he will come to do it for the proper intentions. Okay, so let's say translate this to Jews. You have Jews, like the Rambam's classic example. They were captured as children. Tinochos shenishba. What does that mean? Tinoch shenishba, tinochos shenishbu. That's the plural. What happens? They are considered innocent or unwitting when they do not practice the Torah. When they sin, it's because we consider them, well, no one ever raised them. Yes, they should know not to steal and they should know not to murder, but not to make a cup of tea on Shabbos by boiling water. They might not be aware of all these intricacies because they haven't been told anything. So you could look the other way. And even sometimes certain forms of idolatry, there's been argued in it. That's the way it's been for thousands of years. Well, societies like that, where they don't know any better. We also referenced earlier shurim that we had. So what about Jews? Let's say finally they're keeping the commandments. They understand they should live moral and proper lives, but they have a complete disconnection from God. So what does Hashem say about them? So in the olden days, when Jews wanted to leave God, they worshipped foreign gods. They became idolaters. Nowadays, it's more like they become atheists, and we saw that a few weeks ago. That's just as bad. It's also a kfira. It's a heresy that they don't believe in God. So they become atheists. They become secular, as they call themselves. And the prophet describes we should actually dedicate a whole day to studying this. Ezekiel chapter 20 talks about how these off the derech types, basically Jews, completely disconnected from God and his Torah, will have to repent eventually. It starts in Ezekiel 20, verse 30, and it continues until chapter 21. And he tells them that they should seek God. Hayoni nu Hashem Elokim. Im lo b'yad chazakav yizron tiyav chima shvucha em lo chalichem. One way or another, I'm going to rule over you. He swears this. And I swear by my life, or the fact that I live eternally. It should be Yad Chazakah Zeron Tiyah. That's the description of how God gave it to the Egyptians, by the way, at the time of the Exodus, the plagues. And Chima Shefucha, that's not described with the Egyptians. Okay? God's going to pour out his wrath, Emlo Halichem. So basically, yes, it's okay to be a Jewish person and want to live in a society with law and order. But if you do not bring God into it, then you'll have to learn the hard way. Right? Make God the king. Why do I mention this? Because recently, just yesterday, there are many, let's say, secular people, even leftist people, who are slowly waking up to the reality that their delusional attempts at, let's say, making peace with the adjacent Jew haters, the eliminationist anti-Semites around us, is peace attempts are just doomed to failure. And some are already aware of that. But some just don't know what to do. They woke up to that extent, but they haven't woken up religiously yet. So the ideas about how government, at least, assuming we should have a let's say a proper Western state here, which I disagree with, but assuming that we should have a proper democracy and rule of law, let's say a libertarian ideal, they're still missing something. They're still missing this godly connection. So why I mention this because for many of us, we look at politics, we see that. Like we said before, there's no real political home for a person who actually just wants to keep the Torah and wants a state to actually keep the Torah. Why is that? Well, some parties don't have anything to do with the Torah whatsoever. And the so-called religious parties for many years, whether they be the Haradite party or so-called religious Zionist parties, are just there to get a piece of the pie from the government, but they're not actually there to lead the people of Israel and the land of Israel, the state of Israel, in a way as prescribed by the Torah. It's more like just dealing with what is putting out fires. So we haven't found a political party, and sometimes we thought, no, maybe we did. At least the Zahut, the Faglinist ones, they wanted to implement some parts that are recommended by the Torah. For example, rebuilding the temple, and that attracted people like Gilad Alper, who's secular, and Gadi Bilchersky, and I forget what his real name is. So for a while, they had this strange political alliance, and just yesterday, they were noticing online that like I said before, it seems that the military higher-ups and government higher-ups want the Jewish people to suffer in this war. They want defeat. They want many of the citizenry to die and large parts of our land to be depopulated. How do we know that? Because we were warned about that. We actually seen it happen in the last 3 months. Large tracts of Eretz Yisrael have been depopulated, and it's going to be very difficult to ever convince anybody to go back there if we will be allowed back there even. So that's bad. There is a place, I think, Kochav Yair and other places where they're now reporting. This is over the Green Line, by the way, so those people aren't armed well enough, where they're saying that they know that the Arabs are tunneling underneath them and getting ready to attack them. And up north, there was a place where, as reported by legitimate sources, there was some settlements up north that have not been evacuated yet, where the military establishment came to them and said, you know what, if you're attacked by barbarians from the north, we will not be able to come to your rescue in any meaningful way soon enough. So you have to fend for yourself. So they started training their readiness team, the Kitat Konanut, the emergency response team. They started training them and getting them practice and giving them the proper weapons. If you could call that, of course, they don't have enough bulletproof vests and they don't have tanks. They don't have rocket-propelled grenades. They have long rifles, assault weapons, M16s, and that's about it. They barely have anything else. But either way, they have some weaponry, and they're being prepared. And then the military people came in, confiscated all their weapons. So first they told them, you're sitting ducks, but we'll arm you and train you, and now we'll disarm you. Now go have fun. And Gadi Wilchersky was very surprised this is happening. I would have said, by the way, that we see before in Shirim, if you are armed and you are a Jew, or anybody for that matter, like we'll see before, and then a certain party comes and says they want to disarm you, just to know they're the ones who are going to try to kill you, or they're the ones who are going to facilitate others trying to kill you. And therefore, anybody who tries to, I would have told these people, you're not allowed to surrender your weapons. You have to fight back. You hold on to your weapons. They're taking your weapons. You turn your weapons against them, because it means they're now trying to kill you. They'll seize your weapons and they'll shoot you. So that's a problem. And they're wondering about that. So Gadi Wilchersky and Gilad Alper, who had at least a decent, for at least for Gentiles, they had a good idea, but for Jews, sorely lacking. They didn't have that godly component here. They didn't understand what's going on. So I want to explain to them that to the world, right, who basically the ones who matter, the ones who are causing us problems, and who basically dictate how to think to our higher ups, who are basically stuck in this perception. To everybody, you are settlers, even if you live in Tel Aviv. Okay, Atemet Nachalim. You are occupiers, Kovshim, as you say, even if you never crossed any border, and you are evil, even if you never meant or did any harm to anybody. Most of you are. This is happening is because you're Jewish people, and no matter how innocent you are, they're still going to treat you like, well, like they give you the Nazi treatment, and that's what's going on right now, and they're going along with it. The government's going along with it, and therefore, to the enemy and everyone else who's watching, you are a legitimate target, and you deserve what you get because you're Jewish. You have no right to self-defense, even if they say that. They take away right to self-defense as they say it. You have no right to prevent the next massacre, and the higher-ups are 100% on board with that. Understand that. That's why time has come for them to go, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. And most Jews should realize that. You are what, to everybody, you are the worst. And that's why you're supposed to keep the Torah and be a light unto the nations. They will continue, no matter how much you try to show that you are the best at, let's say, the way Dr. England says, you're the best Christian. See, you're not even going to fight your enemy, you're going to turn the other cheek and let them win. They'll still hate you for it because you're trying to be them. You're trying to not be what you are. And you are a Jew. You're supposed to keep the Torah. So that's what the Navi is saying here. Read that chapter from Ezekiel.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.